and house plants. He's kicking over stuff. He snatches off the comforter, the oversheet, the thin sheet, the fitted sheet, pillows kicked, fitted sheet flipped. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome and welcome back to another fun-filled edition of Folklore. I'm your host, Jack, viewing and reviewing the soapiest, sexiest primetime storylines of 1980 and 1981. So whether you're new to this or true to this, sit back and enjoy. Tell the kids it's time to play outside or out of sight. Help leave no questions, suggestions, or concerns for the next 25 to 35 minutes. Everyone else in earshot, be cool, quiet, and kicked out because we are discussing a very serious story. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this is Folklore. Hello, party people, and welcome back to another fun-filled edition of Folklore. Hope you've been enjoying Knott's Landing as much as I have because we are going to go for one more. That's right, 3 in a row. Knott's Landing. This episode is what we like to call on a very special episode. If you are old enough to have ever watched a TV movie, and I don't mean on Lifetime, I meant on one of the major networks at the time, NBC, ABC, or CBS, then you also are old enough to remember watching very special programming. It's when a sitcom would take a more serious approach to a topic, whether it's bullying, drugs, divorce, runaway, that sort of thing. But it would be a little bit heavier. This episode is like this. And I had to ask myself why and when new dramas do this. I think that in the case of Knott's Landing, since this is sort of an ode to scenes from a marriage, it's going to lean towards a little bit more serious, I think, than the other soap operas. They are a bit more bubbly. However, I think Knott's Landing at this point was starting to come into its own. This is just my speculation because I'm doing my darndest to not give away too much of the storyline for myself. I'm avoiding all the major conversations. I'm not buying the books just yet, but I really, really want to. But I do think by this point, the show is sort of holding its own. However, it is still a spinoff. So this episode reminds us of a couple of things. It reminds us that these are serious actors. They came from the stage. They are prepared to put on a show. So you're not going to be able to give them these cheap, fluffy, throwaway lines. These people they're able to carry a story. Number 2, we're about halfway through the season. There's already been a lot that's happening, but it's starting to wane a bit. All the couples, by and large, are making up or on the verge of doing that. None of the kids are knocked up. None of the kids are missing. We got to bring in a new story. We need to introduce something that we could probably bring up later. Enter a very serious episode. We have to watch our girl Valene, the Vidalia Onion Queen, have a little bit of a health scare. We also are it's the obligatory crossover episode where, hey, we got to remind you that this is still a spinoff. Be sure to watch Dallas every Thursday night at 8 p.m. And we are reminded of a couple more character flaws. Nothing I've forgotten, obviously, but we get to dive a little deeper into one of the character's psyche, just a little bit. All right, pour yourself up something hearty. We're going to go through it. We're going to laugh. We're going to cry. We're going to roll our eyes. Season 2, episode 13, Knott's Landing, The Loudest Word. I'm going to get the throwaway line or the throwaway story out of the way this episode because by and large it is revolving around Val and Gary and Val's new diagnosis. Val had a little bit of a growth removed not so long ago. Remember, she's been going to the doctor to see about getting pregnant so that she can carry another one of Gary Ewing's spawns. We'll see how that one turns out. But she's been to the doctor. There was a little snafu. We'll get back to that very quickly. Another woman who had visited a doctor not so long ago was our good sister Ginger. Now, Ginger is still lying around in her home trying to figure out what to do about her and Kenny. Now that Kenny knows that she's all prego-dago, he wants to be a family again. I don't doubt that he wants like a real family. Just because you're like your sexual prowess doesn't really have a lot to do with how you parent. I don't think those two things go hand in hand. But this episode, there was a little something going on with them. Kenny's going through it. He goes to a park pretty early on in this episode, and for whatever reason, it's just like when you get a new car or you have a family member or friend get a blue car, all of a sudden you see that car everywhere. It's like that. Prego radar is up, so he's in the park and he's seeing all these beautiful children and this pregnant couple peppered with children who are laughing and jollying, frolicking through the park, and his little old cheating heart just swells. He buys a hot dog and he's like, God, I got to get my girl back. But Kenny has boundary issues. Do you recall when Ginger was on her job with Gen X, the kindergartners? They were at the zoo learning all the things they needed to learn, and Kenny shows up, showing out with an ape mask or whatever. He does that too. He accosts her as she's coming out of work. Actually, he doesn't. He, mind you, this is 1980, was able to go up to a group of small children and recruit them into his grand scheme of getting Ginger back. As far as I can tell, all the kids were holding up papers that said something, but you know how kids are. They all just kind of bum rushed her when she came out of the building. They're just rattling the papers in her face. You can't really see what they are, but she knew immediately that this was Kenny's hand. God bless the 80s when a good-looking man could just walk up to rando children without anyone batting an eye. I thought that would be so inappropriate today. It'd be so weird. But after the children have accosted and surrounded Ginger upon her exit from school, he's so pumped to tell her, oh my gosh, I saw this couple in the park and he was rubbing her belly and it's so cute. I can't wait to have all that with you. And she's like, that's all fine, well and good, but you are pretty unreliable unless it's in the sack. You are good. I'll give you that. You're good for a good roll in the hay, but that's about it. I made up that part, but she does call him unreliable. We'll come back to that. We got to get to our girl Val. So the show actually opens up with Valene in the kitchen, frantic. It's probably 8 in the morning. She's frantically making breakfast, spinning around telling her girl Karen how she has volunteered to be Ginger's Lamaze coach. Ginger is 14 minutes pregnant, but she's already taken the classes. She's already doing all the things she needs to do. Well, Val gets this phone call, and it's from Dr. Harper. Dr. Harper is not her OBGYN. He is the OBGYN's friend who Val was sent to. And he says, hey, can you come down to the office today? And she's like, why? And I was like, oh, I just want to talk to you about something. You think you can bring Gary? Gary, why? Gary's at work. And he's like, yeah, y'all just come in. Karen is trying to be a good neighbor and not listen while listening, but Val is playing it off. She's chipper. She's moving around. Sure enough, she calls the shop or the dealership, tells whoever answers the phone, hey, tell Gary to be ready in about half hour. I'm going to come get him. They go to the doctor, and unfortunately, Dr. Harper says that the growth that they took out was actually malignant. And surgery has to happen sooner rather than later. He explains, this is all in her colon. Did I already say that? This is her colon. So he thinks that there was a little something just above. There might have been, he didn't feel like anything has spread. He just wants to be precautious. He didn't want to give it the benefit of the doubt. He said, we're just going to take out a little snip above the growth area and a little snip below. We're going to look it over, make sure everything's everything, put you back together again. But I have to tell you that if the cancer has spread, unfortunately, I'm going to have to perform a colostomy. I am slightly embarrassed to admit that although I had heard of a colostomy bag, I never actually knew that was the name of that surgery. Didn't really give it a lot of thought. I grew up with a lot of elderly people, so I've seen different ailments, different, they would often have a different apparatus and there's several amputees. So it's not that I didn't know that this happened. I guess I just never really thought about why it happened. So this news is hard to swallow. It's difficult for Val. However, she's still putting on a really good front. She's holding it together best she can. Gary what would you do? This isn't any news anybody wants to hear. This is a young woman. This is a 32, 34-year-old woman not really expecting to hear this. So they, of course, go back home and they tell Karen. Now, she's taking it serious, but she's a little better with her words than Gary is at the moment. And Valene is just kind of bibbity boppity booing around the kitchen, saying that it's, yeah, the doctor's very confident. They're just going to take a little bit out. The doctor says I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be just fine. But Gary is like, he tells Karen, because him and Karen are sitting at the kitchen table, and he says, what she's not telling you is that he might have to perform a colostomy. If they don't get everything, then, it's going to be a whole thing. And everybody's just like, oh my gosh. Karen's totally upset, but holding it together for Val. She, of course, goes home and she starts telling Sid, the sex machine, about it. And Diana overhears a conversation and she's asking, well, who's sick? What's going on? And they're like, oh, Val's going to have a little bit of surgery. They had a growth removed. They're just going to go back in to make sure nothing happened. But they're giving that look. And Diana's not 4 years old, so pretty quickly she's like, but there's more to it. And Karen tells her, okay, well, if it doesn't go well, they'll have to do a colostomy. Do you know what that is? And Diana's like, yeah, I guess. I hate to admit it, she's damn near sweet this episode. She didn't get on my nerves not one time. Granted, she's not heavily in it, but it is what it is. So the gang mostly knows about Val's little diagnosis. Everybody's holding it together. It's worth noting that nobody is taking it well. At some point, we get to see Richard and Laura. They're basically Laura gets a phone call. I don't know who's on the phone telling her about it. Richard comes into the kitchen and she's like, oh no, Val has to have this major surgery because of this, that, and the third. And he goes, oh, I know. And she's young, she's this, she's that. It's not cancer, it's just a growth. He's kind of being a jerk, just a little. But then he catches himself and he stops and he's like, I'm so sorry, Laura. She goes, you don't have to apologize. I do, though. Ginger told me last night about it, and sadly, the first thing I thought was, wow, Val has cancer. I'm so glad it's not Laura. He said it a little more kind than that. Can we have the difficult conversation? Nobody in their right mind wishes cancer or any sort of ailment on anybody. As hard as, you might not say it out loud, but there's probably a little sense of relief when you understand that maybe your loved one doesn't have it, or at least appreciation. This is the one time I thought, you're not actually a douchebag. That's a reasonable thought, even if nobody would say that out loud. He was in the privacy of his own home. But everyone is not taking it well. I'm not taking it well. Gary's not taking it well. And I temporarily put my disdain aside from him, just for a minute. Val's in the hospital. She's being all chipper. They gave her a little bit of literature to read, a little pamphlet, whatnot. Turns out there's a nurse at the hospital who also had the same procedure a year or so prior. So she's, Val's making sure that she gets in contact with her. Everything seems like it's on the up and up. But Gary decides he needs to go home and change and just kind of wash the day off of him. Now, I'm with you when you're right, Gary. So he starts driving home. And Sid and his oldest boy, the middle kid, are playing basketball in the middle of the street, as one does in a cul-de-sac, no big deal. Gary comes flying up in that pea green coupe, honking the horn and whatnot, parking in his yard, and he yells at the middle boy. He yells at Sid's kid, get out of the road, whatever he says, and then he storms off into his house. Sid has on a fresh navy blue turtleneck and matching pants from JCPenney's, and he'll be damned if you bark at his oldest boy. So he starts skittering after Gary. Only Gary's really agile and really quick and also very tall. So he's able to leap up his steps in 2 or 3 bounds. He goes in the bedroom and you think he's just going to crumble in the middle of the floor and break down in front of my parents' dresser set. I swear to you, if you're watching this in real time, my parents had that exact dresser set back in the day. And I bet yours did too. All of this furniture on the show looks so familiar. Anyway, Gary's looking at his reflection and the knickknacks on the dresser. Baby, it's a clean sweep. Gary starts bursting. He's throwing picture frames. He's snatching down stuff. He's punching house plants. He's kicking over stuff. He snatches off the comforter, the oversheet, the thin sheet, the fitted sheet, pillows kicked, fitted sheet flipped, mattress tossed, flipped, turned about. He's acting a teetotal fool. Now, mind you, this is all in the backdrop of Sid beating down the door. Boom, boom, boom. Gary, Gary. But then he can hear the commotion upstairs. He's like, what the heck? I guess Sid took some taekwondo classes at the rec center because he revs back like he's on Get Shorty or Get whatever, Get Smart, and he jumps and he kicks the door wide open off the hinges, the middle hinge. Not the middle hinge, what is that called? If you have those sort of French doors, whatever that middle beam is, breaks that. It's gone now. And he takes off running upstairs. When he gets upstairs, Gary's a puddle. He's crying in the middle of the floor. Now, right before Sid kicked in the door, Gary had enough wherewithal and just enough energy to crawl over to the telephone. He calls down to Dallas and he talks to his mama. He's crying. He's completely beside himself. So by the time Sid gets upstairs and he sees the wreckage and he sees Gary crying in the middle of the floor, he's like, oh my God, he came up there to beat his ass. He didn't know he was crying. So he has to call in the big guns. And that is, of course, Karen. I'm telling you, he kicked that door open like he was a cop in South Florida at a seedy hotel. I was impressed. I want to see more action sequences with him. I still don't really know what to do about him. I hope he didn't fade into that whole Fallon thing where it's like there's something there. I saw the last episode. There's something there. The fact that he didn't say a lot says a whole lot. I hope they really expand on that. All right. So Karen comes by and she sees the mess, but she, again, is holding it together. And Gary just starts confessing he's been a bum a long, long time. That it's just so pathetic that Val got this. It really should be him because he's the one who's been running away. She's wasted half of her life dreaming about being with him. And look, what does he do? He shuts her out. I lie to her. I cheat on her every chance I get. It's just, I can't stand myself. This should have been me. He says that the loudest word he ever heard was when the doctor said it was malignant. He's beating himself up. And I thought, you know what, Gary? Oh, I get it, bro. I get it. This is tough. Nobody wants to hear this. He's afraid that his wife is going to pass away. That's what I'm thinking, right? Well, anyway, Karen and Sid are like, hey, just come over to our house. You don't need to be alone right now. So they leave the tornado of a bedroom. They let Gary go down first, and then Karen turns to Sid and is like, girl, I don't think he's going to make it. She didn't call him a girl. I don't think he's going to make it. All the women folk end up gathering at the hospital to holler at their girl. Now, Ginger's out in the hallway. I'm going to wrap up her story very quickly. She's out in the hallway for whatever reason, and Kenny comes by, and he's all giddy, and she's disgusted. Like, are you serious? You have no shame. You already stopped me at work. You're already sort of harassing me despite the fact that I sleep with you regularly. I don't know why you're not taking a hint, but you coming up here to harass about me while I'm supporting my friend crosses the line. And he's like, I'm not. I care about her too. I'm just coming to see if she's okay, if I can do anything. She doesn't believe him. So he says, you know what, Ginger? I don't care. You should think higher of me. I don't want to be with you anymore. I don't even want to be your friend. Don't ever call me again. I don't even want to be your friend. Okay, Kenny. So the women are trying to keep it trying to keep it light and bubbly. Side note, Laura is always in lavender. Lavender is one of my favorite colors of purple. It is a lighter shade. I really enjoy it, but it's like that's the color of the year, I suppose. She's always in lavender. Back to it. So they're just trying to keep it really light. Valene's keeping her heart rate, nice and low and calm. And she says, all right, y'all, now y'all got to get out. It's almost time for me to have surgery. Don't anybody say anything corny. I'll just go. I'll talk to you later. So they leave. Everybody does. Karen's the last one out, but Karen walks out of the door and then she turns on her heels. She comes back. She won't look at Val. She's looking at the floor. And she says, I love you. And damn it, wouldn't you know it? Damn it, Karen. Me and the Vidalia Queen are in tears. I'm not going to lie. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I boo-hooed. It was just so beautiful. A little embarrassed. And I'm like, God, I would want to see my best friend. It's too much. I don't even want to talk about it. Okay. So now that everybody left, I'm minding my business, watching this thinking, damn, surely they're not going to get rid of her. How serious is this going to be? Well, while I'm having this thought, guess who pops in? Everybody's favorite little brother, good brother Bobby, stops by and I'm like, hey, Bob, what are you doing? What are you doing in LA? I was actually happy to see him, and so was the Vidalia Onion Queen, but then she freaked out a little. Did you bring Lucy with you? And he says, no, Mama didn't think she should know about it. We're not talking about Dallas, but we're going to talk about Dallas. At what point do you... Lucy is not a 4-year-old girl. At what point? How many things are y'all going to keep away from this girl? Anyway, Bobby's there to make sure everything is everything. How you doing, Val? You going to be okay? You look good. Okay. Where's your husband? All right, I'm going to go talk to him. This is also the obligatory reminder that Dallas is the original and Knott's Landing is a spinoff. Let's flip over one time. I imagine, too, that Val and Gary are going to be in Dallas at Lucy's wedding. I hope so. They should be. If not, that's going to piss me off, actually. Not about Dallas. We'll talk about that now. We'll talk about that later. So later, after Valene has been pushed into the OR, Bobby tears into Gary for acting a teetotal fool. See, the truth is, that call that he made to Ellie, it wasn't just a beautiful, just kind of display of him wailing and crying and, being upset about something. Apparently, this is Gary Ewing 101. His parents and his little brother perceive this as him falling apart, him spiraling, and him not being strong for his wife. I didn't get that vibe. I thought, wow, it's upsetting news. He's not any more upset than anyone else except in the bedroom. This seems normal, but let Bobby tell it. He remembers growing up hearing his mom and dad, Jock and Ellie, argue over Gary. Jock was disgusted because he said that Gary wasn't a real Ewing. He didn't know how to face anything. He was a coward. Ellie said, well, thank God he's not a real Ewing because y'all are showboats or whatever. He's more gallant. He has a little more pride. He's got a little more grace in his humility, you ass. But the truth is, Bob said Ellie didn't want to come face the fact that maybe Gary is a coward because this feels just like all the other 100 times that he's run off when he couldn't handle something. And I had to think back to it. I was like, okay, original brunette Gary, who's now a cop on Dynasty, he did flip out over spilled milk. Quite literally, he stormed off. That was a story we heard off screen too. He stormed off when his family was attacking Valene. We've seen him go on his little bender, but I had somehow forgotten about that. Not necessarily about the bender, but that was par for the course for him because it appears like he's a pretty okay guy, aside from cheating on Valene for no reason and taking the money. Actually, what am I saying? Aside from cheating on his wife, taking the money, going on a 3-week bender, being emotionally unavailable and incredibly immature. Despite all that, I didn't really clock that he felt a way about Valene. I thought he was upset because she had cancer, but let Bobby tell it. The family, Ellie and he, are afraid that he is not going to take care of Valene if she has a colostomy. That's the whole thing, that he's going to be low-key disgusted and not handle her in the way that she should be handled. And I'll be damned if he didn't agree. And that's the thing about this show. He didn't necessarily say, yeah, you're right. But he's just super silent as Bobby's like, and weren't you? You were going to leave, right? Are you going to take care of her? And Gary's like, dude, that's just, you're missing the point. So Bob gets pissed. And he grabs him by his lapels and he's like, you would rather her die than have her live with a colostomy. And Gary can't even look him in the eye because it's implied that that is the truth. And I thought, you know what? I'll be damned. What a selfish... I was speechless. I'm still a little bit speechless. Like, wow, that didn't even cross my mind. Like, he would be so grossed out by her that he would prefer her to be dead than that. So he has a little time to think. Bobby sticks around. Valene is wheeled in. Luckily, by show's end, she's all fine. She's all well. The doctor was right. She's healthy as a horse. They were able to connect everything. Everything looks Gucci and golden. But Gary did come to his senses. He had enough time to think about it. And he said, you know what? Her dying would be the absolute worst thing, not the colostomy. She's here with a colostomy. She's going to be my colostomy bag wife, period, point blank. I love her. Ginger, I got to just throw this last little part in because this is where the veil was lifted. During the surgery, Gary is sitting in like the waiting room or the cafeteria, whatever. Ginger walks in because she's like upset at home after the fight she and Kenny had, or that he just want to be a friend. And when she walks in, she sees that Kenny is just sitting with Gary. Like he really was there just to be a stand-up guy. She walks up to him and she's like, we need you. We need you. So I guess Kenny and his wayward, you know what, are moving back in the house. Congratulations, the wards are back together. But yeah, this all ends with Valene not having cancer, Gary realizing that he was a serious douche canoe and he's going to be on the straight and narrow at least into the next episode. There's a tiny little part I left out. Gary did indeed run off, and Sid comes to the hospital to look for Gary, but then he's introduced to Bobby. And I'm like, oh, hey, I'm Sid and Bobby. And Bob's like, do you know where Gary is? Sid's like, no, I don't, but I'll go find him. He's like, cool. Would you tell him that I didn't mean what I said to him? I actually did mean, I meant every word, but just tell him I didn't. And I loved it. It was so good to see a little bit of tough love. Although I didn't know that he needed it, it was really good to see it. Gosh. There's some really staggering statistics about when a spouse becomes ill, like the rate of divorce goes up. I guess I knew that in the back of my mind, but I just hadn't really thought about that. That can be quite difficult. But Gary stepped up, at least for the foreseeable future, and we will have to wait and see what comes. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Join me next time as we jump back into Dallas. I'm going to do that while it's fresh on my mind. We got to get Lucy hitched. I believe it's a two-parter. I may just do both of them together, and then we'll just compound on everything else. I've already watched Falcon Crest. I have not watched Dynasty yet. The Falcon Crest was good, y'all. Oh my God, it was so good. We got to talk about the fashion, the weird pleather realness, the kookaloo hair, the Zsa outfits to bed. It's a whole mess. In the meantime, in between time, take care of yourself. I mean that. You only get one body. Treat it well. Stay moisturized, stay hydrated, mind your business, and keep all of your drama on TV.